From the moment Officer Patrick spotted the sad-looking dog clutching a white bag like his life depended on it, he knew he had to find out what was inside. But catching the dog turned out to be much harder than he thought. The whole time, Patrick kept wondering what could be in that bag, but nothing he imagined came close to what it actually was. What started as a simple task suddenly became way more complicated. After a lot of effort, Patrick and the rescue worker helping him finally managed to corner the strange, nervous dog and get a hold of him. Once they did, they were able to carefully take the white bag out of the dog's mouth. Patrick had been amazed by how determined the dog was to keep that bag close, even though it made it harder for him to run and meant he couldn't even try to bite in defense. Now, Patrick's curiosity about what was in that bag was off the charts. With the dog finally secured in the cage, Patrick opened the bag, and the second he looked inside, he let out a loud yell. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. So what exactly was in that white bag? Why did the dog care about it so much? And what could possibly scare a police officer like that? Officer Patrick Stevenson had taken all kinds of strange calls before, and he knew that people sometimes exaggerated. So when several reports came in about a dog behaving oddly at the local park, he wasn't too concerned. He figured animal control would take care of it. What he didn't expect was that the situation would be too much, even for them. By the time the fourth person called in, Patrick realized animal control probably wasn't responding, so he contacted them himself. That's when he found out the truth. They were short on staff, all their trucks were out on other calls, and only one person was even available to help. But there was a catch. Because of safety rules, two people had to go out together to pick up a stray. With no one else around, Patrick offered to go along. He had a pretty quiet day ahead anyway. That decision kicked off one of the craziest days of his entire career. Before heading out, Patrick looked over the notes from the calls. A few people had said the dog would growl or bare its teeth if anyone got too close, but no one thought it would actually attack. It wasn't a large dog, and Patrick figured it was up to Austin, the rescue worker, to handle things. But in hindsight, that might have been a mistake. This was Austin's first solo trip without a senior animal control partner. He was grateful for Patrick's help, but Patrick wasn't trained to handle scared or aggressive dogs. Still, Patrick wasn't too worried. Maybe he should have been. When they reached the park, it didn't take long to find the right spot. A small crowd had already gathered nearby. Patrick and Austin got ready. Neither of them had any idea what was coming. The truth was going to surprise them both and completely change how they thought about animals. All the bystanders were keeping their distance from the dog. It was lying down, panting in a patch of grass. The sun was out, and at first glance, Patrick didn't get why people said the dog was acting strange. He slid on his sunglasses and looked more closely. That's when he heard it. The dog started to whimper, soft at first, then louder and louder until it was howling. At first, Patrick thought it was just snapping at the air. But as they stepped in a little closer, he saw it more clearly. The dog would make a sound, then bite down on a bag lying by its mouth. What could possibly be in that bag? Turns out the callers hadn't been exaggerating. The moment Patrick and Austin moved toward the dog, it bared its teeth and looked ready to defend itself. Then it stood up and stared them down. Patrick felt a wave of tension hit him. This wasn't fear in the dog's eyes. It was purpose. Whatever was in that bag clearly meant everything to this animal. Austin's hands trembled slightly as he grabbed his gear. He had a dog-catching pole with a loop at the end, something meant to gently secure animals. But each time he tried to hook it over the dog, it dodged and moved away. After a few failed tries, the dog suddenly bolted, then turned and stared right back at them from a distance. Austin frowned and explained something that caught Patrick off guard. Usually, dogs react to the pole by snapping at it, trying to bite or fight. But this one? It barely seemed to notice. Its full attention was locked onto the bag. It was like it had been trained to carry and protect it. Patrick had never seen a dog act like that. He tried to think through it. Why would a dog be so obsessed with an object? Was there food inside? A toy? The poor thing was clearly upset. It was crying after all. It might even be injured. But even then, the dog was putting the bag above its own safety. Patrick and Austin took a moment to go over everything they'd noticed so far. The dog didn't look like a stray. It was well fed, with a clean coat. It acted more like a house pet than something that had been on the streets for a while. But even with all these people standing around watching, no one had stepped up to say they were the owner. Austin scanned the area and pointed out something that made things even trickier. The park didn't have many spots where they could trap the dog easily. If it decided to run again, they'd never catch it. It was fast. After talking it over a bit longer, they finally came up with an idea. Austin suggested using the bystanders to help steer the dog in the right direction. With so many people nearby, they could try to gently guide it into a corner. Patrick turned to the group and quickly explained the plan. Thankfully, most of them agreed to help without hesitation. Austin stepped in to assign spots, directing where each person should stand. The setup actually sounded doable. The park had a few fences and was a manageable size. If everything went well, they could guide the dog into one of the corners where it would be easier and safer to catch it. Anywhere else, if that had been the easiest path, the dog probably would have gone that way. But Austin wasn't so sure anymore. This dog was different from any he'd dealt with before. Once the group started carrying out the plan, it became clear the dog was confused. It growled at a few people, but started backing away, just like Austin had hoped. Still, Patrick stayed tense. He kept thinking about what might happen when the dog realized it had nowhere else to go. Would it try to attack? Eventually, they managed to guide the dog into a corner of the park where a fence blocked off the rest of the path. Austin stepped forward with the catch pole. The dog tried to dodge, but now there was no way out. For a few seconds, the dog froze, not sure where to go. That's when Austin moved fast and got the loop around its neck. To both of their surprise, the dog didn't fight it. Instead, it just went still, like it had given up. Patrick could tell how drained the poor thing was. It needed water, maybe even medical attention. Still, one thing hadn't changed. The dog refused to let go of the bag. Austin went back to his vehicle to grab a cage so they could safely transport the dog. He was hopeful that if no owner came forward, someone would want to adopt it. It was young, healthy, and clearly used to being around people. But before they could even think about the next step, they still needed to get the bag out of the dog's mouth. When Austin returned to where the dog had been lying earlier, the scene looked almost exactly the same. The dog hadn't moved at all. It was lying there, still clutching the bag like it was the most important thing in the world. The animal looked completely spent. Patrick had gently pinned its head to keep it still, waiting for Austin to act. Austin felt torn. He hated seeing an animal in this shape, so worn out and scared. But at the same time, they didn't really have a choice anymore. They had to move forward. That's when he noticed something. The dog's tongue was hanging out, nothing unusual for a dog that needed to cool down, but what caught his eye was the fact that the mouth had finally opened. It hit Austin right away. The dog wasn't holding the bag anymore. He leaned in for a better look and confirmed it. The bag was now lying right in front of the dog's mouth, free to be taken. He and Patrick locked eyes. No words were needed, just a quick nod from Austin, and Patrick understood. He had to make sure the dog couldn't lunge forward. Austin stepped carefully toward the bag, eyes locked on it. But just then, the dog realized what was happening. In a split second, it sprang into action, trying to grab the bag again, but this time it couldn't quite reach it. Caught by the loop and held in place, the dog started pushing hard against Patrick's hold. It barked and even tried to bite, but no matter what it did, it just couldn't get back to the bag. The fight was still in it, but not enough to win. Austin had made his way over to Patrick and the dog. Just a few seconds later, he managed to grab the bag and quickly stepped back, putting some distance between himself and the others. They gave the dog a bit of space to calm down and burn off the last of its energy. Patrick stayed on the ground, still holding his position, but glanced over his shoulder, curious to see what Austin would find inside the slightly heavy bag. Were they finally about to discover what the dog had been guarding so fiercely? At the same time, Austin was starting to question if he was even prepared to handle whatever was about to be revealed. As he opened the bag, he froze for a moment, then pulled out a bunch of dog collars. Dozens of them. Patrick shouted in shock. The collars came in all kinds of sizes and colors, clearly used, with many still covered in bits of dog hair. It was obvious that they had belonged to different dogs. But why were they all stuffed into this one bag, and why had this dog gone to such lengths to protect them? The sight raised more questions than answers. Where had all these collars come from, and how did this particular dog end up with them? It hadn't just been carrying the bag, it had been willing to fight to keep it safe. Austin couldn't shake the growing sense of unease creeping in. Something about the whole situation felt off. The longer he thought about it, the worse that feeling got. He and Patrick talked quietly, both a little shaken, but still focused. They agreed they worked well as a team, and whatever this was, they were determined to figure it out. First, though, they needed to get the dog safely to a shelter. At this point, the poor animal looked completely spent. Moving it toward the truck wasn't going to be a problem. While they gently guided the dog, Austin noticed something for the first time. There was a collar around its neck, too. He quickly removed it, while Patrick still had the dog under control. He didn't know it yet, but this small detail was about to change everything. They loaded the dog into the truck and made their way to the shelter. When they arrived, the staff took over right away. The dog was placed into the care of the shelter team, and Austin was given a chance to step back. His coworkers could tell by the look on his face something about this wasn't sitting right, so they gave him space. The focus now was on the bag and the mystery it carried. Patrick asked if there was a quiet room they could use, and Austin led him to one. Inside, they laid all the collars out on a large table and started sorting through them. It didn't take long before Austin noticed something strange. While the collars were different in appearance, they all had one thing in common: very little information. Most pet tags list a name or an address. These only had numbers. As he lined them up, Austin realized the numbers ran from 1 to 26. And the collar that had just come off the dog, the one that had been carrying the bag, it had the number 27. That stopped both of them cold. It was already a strange situation, but now it felt like they'd stumbled onto something even bigger. If this dog was number 27, did that mean there had been 26 before it? And if so, what had happened to them? Why had this dog been carrying all those collars? That question was still hanging in the air. Luckily, there was one more clue. Austin noticed that the collars all had something else in common, a code etched into the back of each tag. At first, he brushed it off as random, but when he realized there was a pattern across all the tags, his gut told him this was important. He didn't recognize the code right away, but after a quick online search, the answer became clear. It wasn't a password or anything like that. It was GPS coordinates, real locations, and one of them pointed to a spot just outside the city. Austin and Patrick felt a rush of excitement. The coordinates led to what looked like an old house, tucked away from the rest of the neighborhood. It didn't make sense, but they knew they had to check it out. It was already getting late, and Patrick had to call it a night. With a little regret, he told Austin he couldn't go with him. So Austin packed the collars back into the bag, including the one from the dog they had rescued, and headed out on his own. The drive took about 20 minutes. Along the way, Austin called his team to fill them in on what they'd found and where he was headed. When he finally reached the place, the house looked better than the photos online had shown. but it still gave off a strange feeling. Austin parked quietly, grabbed the bag, and walked up to the front door. The moment he rang the wooden doorbell, a chorus of barking erupted from inside. One of the dogs jumped up against the window, and that's when Austin noticed its collar, number 31. Moments later, the door opened. An older man stood there, just as surprised to see Austin as Austin was to see him. They stared at each other for a second before both realized they knew each other. Austin had seen this man many times before at the shelter. He was a regular, and the man recognized Austin just as quickly. They'd talked plenty of times. This man had always shown up asking for the oldest, weakest dogs, the ones that no one else wanted. The old man explained that he didn't just visit Austin's shelter, he picked up senior dogs from shelters all over the city. He had a gift for caring for them, bringing them back to life in a way. He wanted to give them comfort, peace, and love in their final years. As for the dog with collar number 27, the man said it had run away recently. He guessed that the dog must have picked up the scent of the bag, which reminded him of an old friend, another dog that had passed. So he probably took the bag and carried it with him out of grief and loyalty. Seeing the bag again brought a huge smile to the man's face. Every collar in that bag represented a dog he had loved. Each one held memories. It meant everything to him. Austin felt something shift inside. It was rare to see someone who gave so much of themselves to animals that others had given up on. He left quietly a little while later. It was getting really late, but he knew he'd never forget this night. The next morning, the old man came to the shelter to pick up dog number 27. The dog lit up the second he saw him. Austin watched with a smile as the man not only took his beloved companion home, but also adopted 2 more older dogs. And just like that, 3 more animals were headed to a home where they'd be truly cared for. Austin knew without a doubt they were in the best hands possible. Thanks for watching. If this story warmed your heart like it did ours, go ahead and give it a thumbs up, hit subscribe, and share it with someone who loves animals. We've got plenty more real stories coming your way. See you in the next one.